It's Mr. Pollock. Good to see you. Hopefully you are having a good weekend. It's Saturday and I'm going to make this little video about the Transcontinental Railroad. So I'm going to share the screen so you can see what I'm looking at. This week we're going to spend our whole week on the Transcontinental Railroad. Pretty big deal because in 1869 the railroad finished in Utah. It's actually somewhere that you could drive and actually see the place where the railroad finished. There's a big museum and stuff up there. It's at Promontory Summit up there in Box Elder County. So today what we're going to look at specifically is some pictures that I viewed last year in 2019 because it was the 150-year anniversary of the railroad finishing. And so all throughout Utah, they had all kinds of special events and different things. And so this one was at the University of Utah. And it was about the Chinese that were instrumental in the success of the project. So one of the things we're going to do, if I can figure out how to advance this slide. This is going to drive me crazy if I can't. Well, I'll do it that way. So this whole thing that I saw at the University of Utah was actually a grandson of one of the Chinese workers. And so what he did is he went through and looked at the photographs that they did back in 1869 leading up to the railroad. And he spent the last 5 years going around to the exact spot where they had taken these pictures, and then he took pictures to show what it looked like today. Most of the pictures that he took was in 2015. Again, it was leading up to the 2019 150-year anniversary. So most of us have seen the pictures that they showed from Promontory Summit. This is a picture that one of the famous photographers took. The flag only had 37 stars because there were only 37 states at that time in 1869. Utah still wasn't a state. It was still only a territory. It would become a state several years later, okay, several decades actually. So this is what it looked like. You got to remember they had these big cameras and they'd have these covers that would go under, and they had to leave the shutters open for so long that if you moved at all, you would see what looked like almost like a ghost, right, in these pictures, because they had to leave the shutters open so long to let the light in. You can see along here how the railroad is built. You can see the ties, the wood ties, and then you have the iron rails, and then somebody would come along and bolt those rails together, and then they would have these huge nails or spikes that they would spike the nails down in, okay? One of the famous photographers' last name was Hart. This is a different crowd, you can see, right, from the other side. And then probably the most famous is a guy last name Russell. He's the one that did this photograph. This shows the two engines, the two locomotives together, the 119 and the Jupiter. This is the famous photograph. Interesting enough, they did not allow the Chinese workers in this photograph. So if you look at this photograph, you'll notice that no Chinese workers, even though the Chinese had significant help in that. This other one is Andrew Russell, okay? You can see that. They're laying the last of the tracks down. So here we go. Here we're getting into it, right? So these are the challenges of the Central Pacific. They're the ones that are coming from California, heading east. They're the ones that would have had to go through the Sierra Nevadas. It took from 1865 to 1868, so 3 significant years for the Chinese workers to build 15 tunnels through the Sierra Nevadas. One of the things people don't understand is the train has to go pretty flat. It can't go up really, really well, and it certainly can't go down really well because they don't have good brakes back then in 1869. So again, I really love this because it shows what the tunnel looked like back then in 1869 and then what it looks like today. Again, most of these photographs are taken in 2015. You look down here at the bottom. So what it looked like 5 years ago, okay? So to get through, they either had to tunnel or just to dig it out. And this particular one, they had to dig because the locomotive couldn't go up and over it, okay? So in 1865, the Chinese filled more than 4 out of 5 jobs for the Central Pacific. So they hired a lot of Chinese workers. They hired the Chinese workers, one, because they were hard workers. They did the job. 2, they had experience with dynamite, nitroglycerin, gunpowder, so blowing stuff up, okay? And so they did the job. It's really pretty awesome. So here's the picture, and then this is what it looks like today. Notice that this cut, this is called the Bloomer Cut. It's just outside of Sacramento, about 32 miles out of Sacramento. It's just wide enough for the locomotive to squeeze through, okay? It's 800 feet long and about 63 feet deep, okay? This was a big challenge that they had to face. Again, this is what it looked like back then, and this is what it looked like today, okay? All right, here we go. Here's another one. This is called Cape Horn Cliff. You can see on the left the picture of what it looked like, right? They would just take enough away so that the locomotive can make it around the corner. And again, down here, this is what it looks like today. This says that they would hang down from ropes, and some of the workers died through a combination of falls and blasting accidents. Again, notice that they just take just enough off of this so that the train can pass through. I love this picture because you can see that, again, back in 1869, here's the first tunnel. Here's a second tunnel right here, right? And then this is what it looks like Mr. Lee and his friends climbed up. Mr. Lee is the grandson of one of the Chinese workers. So this is what the tunnels look like today, okay? These men were amazing. They were hard workers. At some point, the California Transcontinental Railroad, the Central Pacific, tried to pay them less because they were discriminatory against the Chinese. And the Chinese went on strike and said, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it for less than what you're paying the white people. Some of the tunnels they built caused avalanches. There's stories about the Chinese being caught in these avalanches, and their bodies would not be found for months later because there was so much debris and stuff on top of them. There's one story that they found one of the Chinese men, and he still had his shovel and his pick still in his hand, even though he had been covered and killed with the avalanche and the falling of the rock. I really love this explanation because it really shows you the determination that these Chinese had from 1863 to 1865. The Central Pacific, that's the railroad that was coming out from the California, had only finished 118 miles of track. Again, I'm just reading this thing right here. For the next 2 years, it struggled through the high Sierras, but the new workers from China propelled the line 197 miles to Nevada state line. Once they got to Nevada, then they were out of the mountains and they went to the flatland, and they exploded into action. While it took 4 years to finish 350 miles, it only took 1 year and a month to streak across Nevada of 450 miles. So if you look at the track that was done by the Union Pacific coming out from Nebraska, Omaha, and the Central Pacific people laid a lot less track. And the reason why they laid a lot less track is because they had those first years going through the mountains where they had just a difficult time finishing. This is actually a picture in Utah, up Weber Canyon. You can see the tunnel. It's number 3 that goes through the Wasatch Mountains. So this is what it looked like back in 1869. And then this is what it looked like in 2015 when Mr. Lee took the picture. Okay. Beautiful picture with the fall leaves. Pretty amazing. This is the 10-mile canyon. The story about this one, it actually says that Mr. Lee and his friends had to climb up on the mountain 4 times to try and figure out exactly where Mr. Russell had stood when he originally took this photograph. So you have this coming out of the canyon right here, right? And so then he does this, and this is the picture from 2015. One of the things that people don't understand is sometimes they had to fill. Now, we've seen a lot of taking rock away, right? They've done tunnels and they dug these little ditches and stuff to get the train through. But this one is a huge project. And this one actually is in Utah too. But this is called the stone abutment for the Union Pacific's big trestle. So on this one, instead of trying to dig this down and dig this down to make it flatter, they actually brought in stone to fill in. So the Central Pacific's big fill. Now, as they were getting closer and closer in Utah, they started to negotiate where the track would go. They wanted, Brigham Young wanted the track to go to Salt Lake City because he figured if it goes to Salt Lake City, that'll be really significant for Utah and the Mormons. The United States decided to go north of the lake and around near Ogden instead because they didn't want to do what Brigham Young wanted. And so they end up going north of the lake instead of south of the lake like Brigham Young wanted. As they got closer and closer, each company kept laying track because they got paid for every mile of track that they laid down. And while they were negotiating, they actually passed each other laying track. And that's what it says down here. To earn more government dollars, the 2 companies actually built right past each other. Their crews worked just a few yards away, one going east and the other one going west, because they get paid for every mile of track they put down. Now, once they negotiate, then they have to backtrack, and then they bring the 2 tracks together at Promontory Summit, and the rest is history. May of 1869. It's such a significant thing that we decided to put it on our quarter. So if you ever see the state quarters, you'll see that Utah has the picture of the golden spike. Anyways, that was it. Make sure you fill out your worksheet, turn in your worksheet. Don't Google it. I guarantee if you Google it, you're going to get some wrong. So make sure you watch my video and get the answers from my video. And hopefully you're having a good week. Again, hopefully you like the railroad, because we're going to spend all week on the railroad. Okay. Have a good evening. Bye.